appreciate you coming out tonight. You've all had a chance to mingle and look at the boards a little bit. We're going to do a presentation and take you through a lot of the material that the consultants have developed as they've been working through their process to get to what you saw on the boards, as well as some of the other conclusions and recommendations that are starting to percolate to the top as they're doing their work. And so we're hopefully going to talk for about 30, 40 minutes, and then we'll have some question and answers. We have a lot of material to get through. The city has been working diligently for the past several years to try to effect a redevelopment at the mall. And know that it doesn't always outwardly appear that way. Most of our work up until now has been done in really in private with the property owner, General Growth Properties, and to try to find a way to bring their interests and city interests into alignment and help move that redevelopment forward. As you may or may not know, as part of that, we had put an urban renewal area in around the mall, and that we had put in place when conversations were very fruitful and economic times were better, and we thought a redevelopment was just around the corner. Unfortunately, times changed, things changed. We've taken that urban renewal authority away, but it's certainly a tool that can be put back in place. So when those conversations started to die off, change for a variety of reasons, not the least of which were the economic conditions and the challenges that GGP was beginning to understand they were facing, the city asked itself a question, and I think it was a conversation between Mike Freeman, the chief financial officer, and Darren Atterbury, the city manager, that precipitated the idea of the city taking a more active role in what's happening at the mall. The idea was, let's go and talk with GGP and see where they're at and if they are still able to move forward. And if not, let's float the idea of us acting in a more active way, a more proactive way on the corridor, and doing some of the development, pre-development work and market work to determine what could be supportable at the mall. At the same time as that process was moving forward within the city staff, we also were having kind of an active debate about some of the emerging vacancies on the corridor in terms of large format retailers, what that meant, and starting to identify and understand the relationship between the corridor and the mall. And that led us naturally to think about a study when we put it forward that considered not only the mall, but the corridor itself and the importance of those adjacent properties to the mall. So that brings us to tonight, to this presentation. Last fall, we issued an RFP and selected a consultant team that will be presenting the rest of the show. I have been extremely pleased with the consultant team that we hired. We picked a team consciously that was both grounded and aspirational, one that has experience working for private sector clients and understands the challenges of presenting good quality retail and something that's compelling and will bring retailers and consumers. But also a team that's worked with the public sector that understands our desires to have a high quality place, a place that we feel our community deserves, and one that brings a sense of pride in the place to our citizens. And that team our team does that. Tonight we have Warren Wilson with us. Warren has been in the industry for over 30 years. He started out in the Rouse Company, which many of you may not know is a major national retail, planned community, and urban developer, or was until GGP purchased them several years ago. Warren spent a bulk of his career in that environment working on retail development and urban retail development. He ended up being the director of development for GGP and had some oversight responsibility for Foothills Mall. ELS, our lead consultants, have done numerous mall redevelopments and corridor studies for both private sector and public sector clients. They understand what it takes to make a place compelling for both retailers and consumers alike, and they understand what both the private sector and the public sector want when they come together on the kind of partnerships that will be required in order to move this forward. And last, Economic and Planning Systems, EPS, rounds out our team, bringing economic and financial analysis capabilities to the team to help us remain grounded and make sure that we stay within market parameters. EPS has been working in this community for many, many years. They've done work such as the economic impact study that helped to gain the financing for Mason Corridor. They've worked on several of the retail projects that the city has participated in recently, as well as several of the sub-area plans. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Jamie Rushin, principal with ELS and our lead consultant, to take it from here.
Great, thank you, Josh. We're really glad to be here. Fort Collins is a great community. We've really been enjoying coming out here, getting to know the situation. And right off the bat, I want to say that we all have become boosters and are quite optimistic about the prospects for the Midtown Corridor and for Foothills Mall. The study area, to be clear, is from Prospect to Harmony, and then south of Harmony to the station, the last station on the BRT. We're really between the railroad tracks and the BRT, or the bus rapid transit. I'll keep using BRT, but that's the bus rapid transit that's being constructed in College, and then over to JFK, and then including Foothills Mall. That's 3 miles, the old section lines from the old maps, 1 mile, 1 mile, 1 mile. The sketch on our right is one of our first impressionistic sketches trying to absorb the meaning of the area and really this gateway intersection coming off the freeway at Prospect. 3 miles, again, of the corridor, Foothills Mall in the middle, and another gateway intersection at the southern end at Harmony, again, coming from the freeway. At the outset, we set initial goals that we've really stuck to, and I think that we've been answering along the way in our study, which is about 2/3 complete at this point. First, of course, is to build on and reinforce the great assets that are Fort Collins already. I mean, I pick up national papers all the time and read that you're #1 or #5 or #3 as livable places, great places to retire, and so forth. We think those are great assets to leverage and build upon in the commercial redevelopment of Midtown. Create a vibrant district. We'll get into that in more detail, but as Midtown develops, we think that there's an opportunity for it to be a district as identifiable as Old Town, as the campus, and to become a key element of Fort Collins' identity. That said, continuing, leveraging, and connecting the downtown, CSU, and Foothills Mall together more coherently into an imaginable and clear vision of what Fort Collins as a place is. Improve existing assets, and we do think that there are a number of assets at the mall and on the corridor. When we first came to town, people identified for us a sense of decline, and there has in fact been some decline, dropped sales, there's vacancies, but frankly, by and large, we see a number of really positive assets in the area to be developed. Capitalize on the opportunities, opportunities being our word for some of those vacancies and troubled properties. Without those, there wouldn't be a chance for reinvention or for redevelopment. Create a new address and value with the BRT. We think the BRT is really a significant catalyst element coming into Midtown that will drive a significant amount of development, probably heavily on the residential side, which we'll get to later. Be flexible and market ready. We're not interested in preparing a plan that goes on a shelf because it's rigid and it's too fixed a vision. One of the elements, key elements of our team is an attitude of being flexible and market ready. And then part of why we're here tonight, to build some support, to reach out to the community, to build consensus, because without that, without a vision for a long-term build out of the redevelopment, we're really nowhere. So tonight's very important to us. The deliverables, at the end of the day, we will prepare an economic and land use analysis, development framework and urban design plan, financing strategies to help accomplish some of the concepts that we're proposing, development and disposition options, which Dan will speak to later, and then an implementation action plan. Our study is the beginning. It's the beginning of the beginning, and the large part of our results will be a list of recommended studies and elements that come subsequent to this study. We started our work here, and this goes back to when we first met with the city looking at the regional context. And our original view, our original take on the regional context has really held up pretty well. And of course, we start with the identifiable, memorable downtown, Old Town of Fort Collins, which I think in a lot of people's mind is the heart of downtown. There is the traditional highway and railroad corridor extending from the downtown that naturally received a lot of historical development. As with a lot of communities around the country, each different and unique in their own way, but a typical pattern, the bypassing freeway and the emergence of residential and commercial districts out at the bypassing freeway, and in this case, the picture of La Centera, And then again, in a typical and interesting urban design pattern, the connecting elements that connect from the old town to the emerging sort of new neighborhoods out at the freeway. And in this case, that's really Harmony and some of the commercial development that's occurred out there. This is one of the filters that we look at College Avenue through. The immediate context, here's College. Again, people directed us to vacancies, decline in sales, troubling aspects about College Avenue. Frankly, we came to town, we saw a lot of assets. One of the feature elements that we noticed right away is that out of all the locations in the region that Whole Foods could elect to locate their first store, they moved into Midtown. That's a recent development. It's essentially brand new and I think a really positive sign for the district and the community. At the same time, there are significant vacant and open areas. And again, those are opportunities for us for redevelopment, infill development, and reinvention. And then a number of properties that have probably reached the end of their sort of viable life cycle and that are prime for redevelopment. So we've viewed the corridor as a at least glass half full situation, a combination of emerging and positive assets combined with vacant land and redevelopment and infill opportunities. Overlaid on that is the BRT and the introduction of this bus service, capital improvements coming into the corridor that will drive traffic, but also by just its very concept and capital investiture in Midtown will be a catalyst element, we feel. And then, of course, there's Foothills Mall, which is a significant anchor for Fort Collins and for the corridor. Traditionally, a regional retail drawing mall has certainly seen some decline in sales. The Penny's has moved. The Mervyn's has closed down. But we do feel very positive about the potential of working with the mall. And again, we see assets and opportunities. The presence of an operating Macy's and an operating Sears is a plus. There are many, many communities all across the country that do a lot, invest a lot in attracting anchor department stores to a development in their downtown. Fort Collins has that. Now, yes, the mall may have declined, but we look at those operating traditional department stores and the mall in between as a very valuable asset to leverage and build upon. One essential question that was posed to us at the beginning of the study was, can the mall be saved? In our work to date, I'll very briefly prelude the rest of the presentation, our answer to that is that the mall is in a fragile condition. The sales have declined, but given the assets that are there, given the marketplace and the regional demand, that yes, with proactive investment and redevelopment, it is possible to save the mall. The second question then is, should the mall be saved? And I will report that pretty much uniformly in our conversations with community members, stakeholders, when we ask the question, should Fort Collins, if they can, retain a regional drawing retail destination, the answer is yes, it should. Now, that's a question that we'd like to keep talking and debating about, but the operating premise of our work has been, can the mall be saved? And yes, if it can be, it's very worthwhile to determine in what form and what it might take to do that. That said, I really want to give the microphone over to Dan, who's done extensive market research into the actual economic conditions that would support any redevelopment.
Thank you, Jamie. As ELS was working on evaluating the physical and land use conditions in the corridor, we were looking at the underlying market and competitive market conditions between Fort Collins and other retail development in the corridor. Looking at this first slide, which shows citywide retail sales over the last 5 years, overall sales, total retail sales are up 9% over that time period. But when you look at the regional retail uses that are concentrated in the mall and the Midtown corridor, you see that these major categories of department stores, apparel, furniture are basically all down in sales. So that's showing the existing stress that we're addressing in the corridor. Focusing on department stores and apparel again, right now the leakage outside of Fort Collins is about 30% of those sales. And the inflow from the region to Fort Collins stores is about somewhere between 22 and 25% of total sales. That's down from about 40% back in the middle 90s when everything was clicking along before some of the regional competition had been built in the market. This is comparing retail sales in the Midtown Corridor to total retail sales in the city. Overall, the $629 million in sales in the corridor compared to about $1.5 billion in total in the city, which means that the corridor, the study area between Prospect and Harmony, accounts for about 42% of overall retail sales. And in the sort of regional retail categories we're focusing on, general merchandise, other shoppers' goods, it has, healthy percentages of those total sales in that category. In terms of total space, one of the figures that's been out there quite a bit in the paper is just how much vacant property there is along the corridor. The city has a total of about 800,000 square feet of vacant space. Much of that is in the corridor. About 655,000 square feet is in the corridor. I think what isn't shown on this slide is that although it is 17% vacant, the corridor has 3.1 million square feet of occupied space. So I think people tend to lose sight of the fact that it's still a very viable retail area, and that's sort of the glass half full that we're operating from. We have, over the past few years, developed a fairly sophisticated model with the city of really tracking retail sales inflows and outflows and what the opportunities are. Looking forward over the next 10 years, this is retail demand potentials for the city if it could capture everything in the way of both net new growth as well as existing leakage. So again, the area that we're focusing in on here is what we call shoppers' goods, which is department store, apparel, furniture, electronics, sporting good, and specialty retail. The number, each one of those categories, if you could capture it all, there's some fairly significant potential. One that I want to just point out is department stores, 120,000 square feet of space. That's really a key to some of the mall redevelopment options we're looking at, whether an additional department store can be attracted back to this location or not. In terms of, this is a precursor of some of the slides that we'll be looking at later in terms of redevelopment options for the mall. We're basically presenting two different options, one a mall renovation and expansion option, and one more of a complete redevelopment of the site. In both cases, we're talking about 750 to 800,000 square feet of total retail space on the mall, which is essentially not a lot different than what is there today. A lot of what is there today is vacant. There's only 422,000 square feet of occupied space on the mall property site, including peripheral, but there is a total of 790 some odd thousand square feet of space. So it's more of a reconfiguration, a repositioning, and a redevelopment of what's there to create an operating property. Just comparing these redevelopment options back to the potential square footage again, we're looking at capturing between, under these options, 20 to 30% of overall market potentials in those shoppers' goods and eating and drinking categories. However, to really affect the maximum potential of the site, we really feel we need to get another department store, which means we need to get what literally is the one store opportunity that is out there in the marketplace over the next 5 years. We're not in this project just focused on the mall. We're looking at redevelopment opportunities up and down the corridor. So we're looking at both residential and office demand as well. Multifamily demand, this is building on work that we did on the Mason Corridor project. We expect that there is a potential for up to 3,300 higher density housing units. By higher density, I mean non-single family detached housing units, everything from townhouses to condominiums to apartments that could be built in the corridor, somewhere between 1,900 and 3,300 over the next 20 years. The office demand, these are citywide office demand numbers compared to existing space. Again, not huge numbers, about 1.7 million square feet of new space total over the next 20 years. And our estimate is somewhere between 10 and 20% of that space would be developed in the Midtown corridor. So we see it as basically a complementary use to both the retail refill opportunities as well as the opportunity to introduce significant amounts of new residential development. Just briefly on looking at these other potential redevelopment sites along the corridor, the planning team looked at it both from a physical perspective, what's vacant, what's underutilized now. We looked at underlying market conditions, densities, et cetera, and we've broken the corridor into 3 different districts based on the evolution of development from the North District, which is Prospect to Drake, which was built in the 50s and 60s, Drake to Horsetooth, focused around the mall, which was built in the 70s, and then south of Horsetooth, which was built in the 80s and 90s. But we've identified potential redevelopment sites in each corridor. This is the north parcel here with redevelopment capstone site near Prospect and another site along the Kmart development further south. The mid-district, District 2 area, the redevelopment opportunities include the mall, Foothill Square, the old Steele's Wild Oats building, Thunderbird Plaza site on the south, the Sutherlands and Thunderbird Mall, and the Spradley Bar property closer to the Drake BRT station. And then finally, moving further south, fewer redevelopment sites because it's a newer area, but they're really kind of focused on the vacant big box sites that are located in that part of the corridor, including the Walmart property to the south and the lumber yard just to the north of Harmony Road. So in terms of all of these, the redevelopment sites, there's about 124 acres of land, about 22 different sites that we identified as having potential. Not all of them are going to develop as complete redevelopment. Some of them will end up being just upgrades of what's there today. But in terms of potential, we see these sites as having a capacity to accommodate about 1,600 housing units, about almost 700,000 square feet of retail space, and about 300,000 square feet of office. The key number to look at here is that in terms of net new retail space, it's actually going to go down a little bit over the amount of square footage of space that exists today, 740,000 square feet. So much of it will get refilled, but some of it will get redeveloped and repositioned as residential and mixed-use development.
Very good. Thank you, Dan. Dan's a numbers guy. I draw for a living. So out of all that, what I drew mentally, I guess, is that essentially on the corridor, going into the future, about as much square footage of commercial retail space between College and the railroad tracks in the future as exists today. Probably significantly reconfigured to meet modern tenanting needs, but about the same area would be supported by the market. Likewise, Foothill Malls. What I gather from Dan is that it needs to be significantly reconfigured, but the overall square footage at the mall might reach or slightly exceed the usable space that was at the mall during its peak or heyday, but reconfigured, we think. The game changer coming into the district, among other things, is that 1,600 plus multifamily housing units. And I think that coming development, combined with the need of recycling retail space, can actually lead to a very significant physical replanning of the entire district. And that's what we set out to do. And there is also additional office space possible and some other uses also. Dan talked a little bit about the districts. I don't want to belabor this right now, but there are very distinct physical characteristics to portions of the corridor. District 1 It's really just development sites on the west side with access only from College Avenue. There's no public right-of-way or access along the railroad track. In District 2, the access is much better, and there are a number of significant opportunity sites. District 3 is more recently developed. On that account, there's less opportunity sites. The access and address we feel is quite good. And then down at 3B, there's some real significant sites. And what we always want to remind ourselves is the impact of the BRT, in particular with the residential demand. This is a quarter-mile radius around a bus station, and when you look at the entire corridor, it begins to indicate where the housing, and in particular the student-oriented housing, is going to make a significant difference. We have a number of planning concepts that we want to briefly introduce. One is breaking, and I'll back up a little bit here. One of the key good aspects we found to the corridor is the fairly large size of a number of the opportunity sites. Very frequently we come into corridors where the ownership is fractured down to quite small parcels, and one of the initial very difficult thresholds is to assemble land to achieve significant redevelopment. There's actually very nicely assembled properties that are primed for redevelopment that we think is a very good attribute of the corridor. That said, from a planning perspective, we want to break those large sites down to parcels that can be developed incrementally to meet market demand and to begin to create public realm and access in addition to just College and the major streets that exist today. Another topic we want to address are the frontage roads and how they figure into Midtown. Creating a west side address. The west side of the corridor is really a back side today, and we think it needs to be reconfigured, reimagined as a front side address, possibly, probably, mostly for residential, which ties to leveraging the BRT. What we'll present to you is we've picked 3 sites. We've called them A, B, and C as prototype hypothetical sites for redevelopment in the corridor itself. We've done some detailed studies of Foothills Mall also that we'll share. Public realm and block size, we've used District 1 as an example. These yellow areas begin to indicate how we might break block size down. One of the key attributes of that we'll address in a little more detail coming up is beginning to create secondary access and public realm. If you can imagine having a linear pedestrian, bike, vehicular, tree-lined street between College and Mason, or between College and McClelland. There's a very nice size of parcel, up to 800 feet in some locations, that really make it conceivable, imaginable, and probably the right thing to do to begin to create an additional access and open space down the middle of the corridor. We also will propose creating a number of east-west connections. West side access and address. Today, really, it's the back side facing west. And we think with the introduction of 1,600 units of multifamily housing, that a lot of that housing can really face towards the west, and that there could develop a residential address on the west side and retain a commercial address on the College Avenue side of the corridor. Again, always coming back to leveraging and connecting to the investment the community is making in the BRT. The frontage road address. We're fans of the frontage road. We think the frontage roads do a very significant and good job of separating through fast-moving traffic on College from businesses and residences along the avenue. I know it's been debated in the community in the past, should they exist or not. They don't function as well as they should, and there's some improvements that we'd really suggest be made to them. But we think that these frontage roads create a very significant slow pedestrian, bike, and commercial address along College, and that they should not only be preserved but enhanced. Now, that's sort of a lot of dry planning concepts. We want to throw some visuals in to begin addressing what the vision for Midtown could or may be. And certainly, with the introduction of the residential, the reconfiguration of the commercial space, the densities that would be developed to achieve that, and the introduction of the BRT, over time, we think that a walkable, pedestrian, residential, and commercial district is highly achievable. And that can be in a variety of densities. We've looked at townhomes to quite dense residential, 4 floors over commercial. Likewise, the other commercial uses, we've included a number of photos of recent development in Fort Collins. There's no reason to imagine that as the economic cycle comes back around and new development is attracted to Fort Collins, that there can't be significant office, residential, and hotel development similar to what happened in the last 5 years, but this time happening in Midtown and contributing to a new district. And then the glue that holds it all together for us is really the public space, the public realm, the open space, the streets, the sidewalks, the pocket parks, the play structures, the farmers markets. And we think with some thoughtful planning and channeling of development in Midtown that new Midtown district can support a really great, lush, vibrant district that would add to the districts that Fort Collins has already. And that there would be Old Town, there would be campus, and there would be Midtown as identifiable as a place and as sort of warm to the heart of people as the existing great places that are here already. Back to the slightly drier planning work, this is our prototype Site A. Here's Drake College, this is Spradley Bar, here's the BRT, the Thunderbird Plaza. In this, and these are hypothetical, this is just one way that these sites could develop. We've tested out the housing, the open space, the connections that we're proposing. And so here is 3 or 4 floors of residential, some over commercial, some coming to the ground, predominantly on the west side, commercial uses continuously along College, and then breaking down that pattern of continuous strip mall development where you've got building faces 300 feet back, continuously lined by surface parking lots along College. We want to promote the development of development nodes along College. So there's identifiable public spaces and address that remain open to College and maintain sight lines that would support commercial environments that create this public realm. And then we're showing these connecting axes so that over time you would develop this north-south street and the east-west connectors. Here's a diagram in red of the commercial address coming in at a node. This could take many forms. There could be office, could be hotel, could be residential. What we're perhaps the most concerned about, most interested in, is the creation of the public space and the urban pattern. A little more quickly, prototype B is where Foothill Parkway comes across from the mall. And again, a similar configuration, but specific to this site of creating a public realm, opening off of College, creating a sort of a town square and commercial address, the residential across the back, connecting to the future sites to the north and south that would emerge over time. Diagram of the public space. We could possibly daylight the canal and make an amenity out of that on this site. The commercial address, the connection to the mall, and we always want to keep connecting back to the BRT stations at a planning level. Prototype C, here's the Walmart, Harmony, College, Mason curves around. Again, applying all the same concepts of public space, access, creating new spaces, new connections, creating a new district and environment that is not College, it's not Mason, it's not the BRT, but it's this new spine down the middle of the corridor that makes a new place. That's our fast capsule of our Midtown planning. At this point, I'd like Warren to address a little bit the status of the mall industry and Foothills Mall.
Thanks, Jamie. Good evening. Before Jamie moves into the discussion and presentation of 2 concepts we have for Foothills for discussion, I want to set the stage a little bit about the mall industry, because anything that happens at Foothills or at any mall in the U.S. today is happening in the context of the mall industry. And I think, as most of us appreciate, that's in a sector of commercial real estate that's been very hard hit in this recession. First, there's been tremendous consolidation in the mall and the department store industry, where today most malls are owned by one of a handful of publicly traded mall companies. Most department stores are owned by a handful of large publicly traded department store companies. Those companies seek growth. I mean, their shareholders demand growth, and they obviously focus on those assets which they think can contribute the most growth to their portfolios. And those are portfolios, say in the case of Macy's, 800 stores. In the case of the Simon Company, 300 malls. Case of General Growth, over 200 malls. The mall business is very capital intensive. And we know that capital, financial capital for commercial real estate today is in very short supply. Capital in the mall game is needed for leasing. In other words, to put together the right merchandising mix, and particularly for department stores, these stores have to be incentivized with what's called tenant allowance or financial capital. Then obviously these properties have to be maintained, parking lot, roofs, common areas. And of course, any major renovation or expansion, particularly of the type we're about to discuss in the next slides that Jamie will cover on Foothills, very capital intensive as well. Scale is important. We've touched on this a couple of times. Foothills today is about 800,000 square feet. That's probably about the right size, but is it the right configuration? The mall from Sears to Macy's is very traditional. To the southeast in the property, you have a vacant Penny, a vacant Mervyn's. Mervyn's, of course, no longer exists as a company, and a mall connecting them that I'd say is very challenging today and not the right configuration. Most markets of Fort Collins size or larger support what I'm going to refer to as two traditional department stores, and not including Sears or JCPenney, which I'll categorize as mass merchants, or Nordstrom, Saks, or Neiman's, which are really specialty stores. In most markets, it's Macy's, which operates nationally, as I mentioned, with over 800 stores. And in some areas, you'll find Macy's paired with a Dillard, about 300 store company, a Belk out of the southeast with about 300 stores, or even Bon-Ton, which operates under a variety of names, predominantly in the Northeast and Upper Midwest. Here in this market, we have Macy. Regionally, we also have Dillard operating. Again, Foothills has one store. It has adequate size. We don't think it has the right configuration to capitalize on the market. We think a third anchor and a reconfiguration is needed to really reposition the mall for long-term success. Again, we think its condition today is pretty fragile. Dillard, as I mentioned, is an anchor prospect for this. It's a prospect. This has been reported on, it's been discussed. Right now, there are really no department store companies that are making deals, but as we think about the long term in the future, Dillard, we think, has to factor into this mix and into these considerations. The renovation and expansion concepts would respond to the market, as summarized by Dan, would address the need to reposition Foothills, and would also, respect and take into very serious consideration the fact that Macy's and Sears own their own buildings, they own their own parking fields, and have approval rights over practically anything that happens at Foothills. That's typical in the mall game. And they would view any expansion in terms of what does it do for me, what does it do for the property, and if a third department store were to enter the property, what's it doing for my competition? So there are a lot of moving pieces that have to be reconsidered as part of this. The approaches you'll see are multi-phase, multi-step, and they're incremental. And they could be taken a step at a time, or if the capital is available and the market supports it, they could be compressed into one major project. The first scenario is probably simpler. The second scenario we'll look at involves more phases and is certainly more complex. In any development of this magnitude, risk, you would try to, the developer would try to, any owner would try to mitigate their risk by starting with the first step, but trying to secure the commitments and the approvals for the future step, so that if you take it incrementally, you have some assurance, if the market remains viable, that you can execute the subsequent steps. In other words, you don't say, gee, I'll do step one and hope I can get approvals to do steps 2, 3, 4, and 5. You try to mitigate your risk by getting those commitments, which can be very complicated, up front. So with that, hopefully a little bit of helpful, I hope, context, I'll turn it back to Jamie to go through a couple of our concept plans.
I want to start with a little sort of scale reality check. If people, I assume, can identify the mall here, take a look at the blue line that's going to show up again. There's downtown, all of downtown. Here's Mountain, here's College, that's where I'm staying at the Armstrong. The area of Foothills Mall is essentially the area of the entire downtown of the identifiable downtown of Fort Collins. You look at a mall, you think of a mall as a very singular sort of element, and it's easy to imagine it's smaller or sort of easier to work with than otherwise, but it really is a significant enterprise to take rebuilding it, and it is in fact the entire footprint of downtown Fort Collins. I think the only other point I'd make about these two slides is that Fort Collins, that took 150 years to get that way and to really build out, to have all the texture and intricacy that it's got. The mall's, about 30 years in. We have another 120 to go perhaps. But this is a very valuable diagram to look at, and this is to reinforce Warren's point. This is the ownership diagram of the mall. And so just to reinforce, Sears owns and controls its land. Macy's likewise owns its building and its land. Everybody has approval rights over one another. All three parties have to agree on everything, and that's a fact of the matter in mall redevelopment. And we'll be introducing the city and the economy at large. It's an equation that's interesting and challenging to work with sometimes. The other thing I'd point out, and it's a little detail down here, is the parking count, which I won't describe to you, but based on the vacancies at the mall today, based on the original fairly rich or generous parking allowances, today the mall is very well situated to redevelop because you can put areas of land out of commission, take the parking out, maintaining operating property while building something. There is available land there to play real estate musical chairs with to an extent. The other thing I would say is that General Growth has positioned the mall extremely well for redevelopment, having purchased the Mervyn's and Penny's buildings and land. We've gone into situations where there have been 4 or 5 or even 6 owners on a mall parcel, all having to agree with one another. This is a fairly tidy situation, if you will, of having it consolidated to the extent that it is. This little diagram here, kind of as dumb as it is actually tells the whole story in some aspect. The strength of the mall, the assets of the mall, really, the Macy's, the Sears, and the original mall length between the two. The area where the Mervyn's and the Penny's and that back mall is really configured very poorly. It doesn't suit modern leasing. It doesn't do well. It probably would never do well if we tried to work with it as is. Our recommendation is to demolish that back portion. At the end of the day, once you do that, the remaining original mall, frankly, is a little small, a little short, and it's single level. There's not quite enough lease space there to pay for a redevelopment. So we did a first sketch attempting to figure out how to expand the mall and work with the existing assets. So here's the existing Macy's, the original mall, the Sears, and our concept was to introduce a cross mall and a new department store. So new street shops facing College, take off the back mall, build a new mall to the anchor. At the end of the day, when we looked at this, having realized all this land and territory on the southeast area, we thought that southeast area remained a little underutilized and would remain a backside. So we did another sketch where we put in the new department store, but in addition added a cinema. There are viable cinemas in town, but they're not well situated in terms of synergy with restaurants and shopping and other options for entertainment. We suggested a cinema, some restaurants, a new food court, and when we put all of those together on the southeast corner of the mall, we believe that we're on the verge and have the critical mass of taking what's the backside today and turning it into a new front side. Here is a more fully developed sketch along the same lines. One of the things that we're endeavoring to do all along is to improve the access and address off of College, better connecting the mall to the surrounding streets. The new street shops facing College Avenue, new restaurants, a new restaurant row perhaps on College Avenue, the department store, the cinema over retail, the food court. Again, achieving a critical mass of redevelopment that coincides correctly with 3 anchor department stores and a sufficient critical mass of retail that can be supported by those department stores. Plans, plans, plans. We wanted to show you at least one example of what a renovation could look like, because frankly, it's a little hard to go out to the mall today and imagine what it might be tomorrow. Here's a project that we executed, a renovation. It was a battleship mall. It was 40 years old. It was just ugly as sin. This is the before photos. Here's the after plan and the after photos of the exterior. Essentially, the original mall, as we're proposing here, remains intact. In fact, that's a Macy's and that's a Sears and that's a new Dillard, ironically. Street shops, an entertainment district, and there's a cinema on top. So we took that core mall that was working and added to it, reconfigured it, dramatically made it different, made it feel brand new. This is the interior renovation. It was low, it was dark, it was crummy. And again, we blew the roof off and completely remade the address. We just want to make the point that it's possible to reimagine something that's hard to reimagine. Coming back to the overall plan, we've done some planning. One of our strong concepts here is that the mall, in as fragile a condition as it is, we do believe it is possible for this community to support a regional retail center. That said, we feel that the focus really has to be on the retail mall. That said, with an eye to the long-term future, these yellow zones are surface parking lots that over time in the long term could develop for additional mixed-use development with structured parking. Not something that could happen with the initial redevelopment, but that we want to leave the door open to in the future, make sure we don't cut off opportunities. And again, the intent of that, among other things, is to more fully integrate the mall environment with streets and open space with the surrounding Midtown district. Backing up to a slightly larger view, our prototype site A, B, a reconfigured mall, future redevelopment sites in yellow, and from a planning level, I hope that you can see that in the long term there can be really a dramatic transformation of Midtown into a new form of district, mixed-use district. What else? We pursued another avenue for the mall planning, which is along these lines. Rather than keep the existing mall and work around it, what would happen, and we know that there's a number of examples in the region, if we essentially over time demolished the entire mall and rebuilt it as an open-air, street-oriented center. What that would involve, we think, is building a new Macy's to create more land to work with, build a new Macy's in their new format. We could build one half of a street while the existing mall remained open. One of the key features of our findings is that given the condition of the mall today, we do not believe that the mall can cease operation, be rebuilt, and open again. The strong chance in that case is that tenants and anchors would not return. A key component of all our planning is keeping the mall operating on a continuing basis, stabilizing and reinforcing the assets and the tenants that are there now and functioning well. That means in a scheme like this, we have to phase it, build half a street, keeping the mall, and then come back and tear down the mall and build the second half of a street. This is a more illustrative plan of the same. And one of the benefits of a scheme like this is to the extent to which the public streets literally get redirected and become, the mall becomes part of the fabric of the Fort Collins street system. And it would be a street-oriented shopping environment. The relocated Macy's, the new department store, the cinema. In this case, we located up closer to College Avenue and the BRT, which we thought could be a good location. New street shops in the center, new restaurants. The overall plan, again, with this scheme, we think for the initial redevelopment, the focus needs to be on the mall retail environment. It would be surface parked, but with an eye to the long-term future, we have looked at areas that could be infilled later. And then backing up and looking at the district overall with that plan. And again, just a visual to get us off the plans and to look and remind ourselves just how pleasant, comfortable, and wonderful an outdoor shopping environment can be. So we've got two schemes that we've showed you. We want to share with you some of our sense of comparison between the two. I think one of our big messages is that half measures won't work. Incremental small steps taken at the mall probably would not reverse its decline. Both of the schemes that we've presented, we believe, are significant enough to reposition the mall to endure for another life cycle of development and life. The renovation and expansion concept, the first one I showed, is much less expensive, probably a little less risky than the second scheme. The open air concept takes longer, requires a bigger, earlier upfront commitment, which brings a little extra risk to it, and it is more expensive overall. The first concept retains an indoor shopping mall environment. The second is completely outdoors. And I can tell you, if we chose to, we could argue indoor, outdoor, tastes great, less filling for hours here. In fact, we gave this presentation an hour ago, and there were two guys, one on each side, that started at it, and an hour after we started the conversation, they left the room together still fighting, outdoors, indoors. There are pros and cons to each, and I think in question and answers, if we want to come back to that, we certainly can do that. Both concepts, very extensive. They're both very complex. Require phasing over several years. Essentially, it's a very significant capital investment to remake the mall into a configuration that will endure. At the end of the day, as Dan pointed out, the market will support a mall about the same size as the mall at its previous peak. That means the new revenue off of the mall will not support the redevelopment alone. One of the conclusions of our report is that some form, if the mall is to be redeveloped and for that to be feasible, some form of public-private partnership, including some public investment, would be required. We would expect, it's natural for the development to be very fluid and dynamic. There's a lot of players. There's Macy's, there's Sears, there's the mall owner, there'd be future anchors, the city would be involved, all in the context of the larger economic environment. It would be very fluid, very dynamic. A fixed plan will not survive. This will keep changing and changing and changing again from what we started here today. Which comes to our last conclusion on the comparison, is that really I think it's a false flashpoint to pick between schemes. Really the right scheme is the scheme that's going to work, and that we would counsel flexibility as to the actual physical plan of the mall moving forward. Next steps. We're going to keep working on our mall feasibility economic work. We'll be testing public financing options. Drafting our recommendations, keep talking to you all and stakeholders. We're concluding with a council work session in late April. Our deliverables are essentially the same as I outlined before. And to take this last one, action plan, some of the possible action plan items that are not included in our study but that we'll be recommending for future work. There'll be any number of detailed design studies fleshing out some of our ideas. This is already starting to happen, which is the formation of merchant and property owner organizations precedent to business and general improvement districts, which is terrific. We hope to keep talking with the mall owner, current and future anchor department stores, likewise the corridor property owners, move the design for Foothills Mall forward, which as I said will be fluid, iterative, dynamic. The conclusions of our study will need to be incorporated to some extent into the just started update of the city's comprehensive plan. Some of our transportation ideas after the continued studies would lead to an amendment of the transportation master plan. To achieve some of our concepts for breaking the block sizes down and creating new public space, access, and open space, we will be proposing amending the transit overlay zoning for Midtown. To better achieve that and to incentivize it to some extent. We'll be looking at, or what would come after the study would be designating certain areas as urban renewal areas to enable tax increment financing. And we'll be looking after our study to evaluate the formation of business and general improvement districts that might be a vehicle to support some of the Midtown public infrastructure improvements. All that said, we've just thrown a lot of information at you. Fort Collins is just a really terrific place. We don't have to tell you that. I read it in the national magazines. You guys are here. You live it. It's a wonderful place. Our feeling is if we build on the assets that really are identifiably Fort Collins, combine really thoughtful planning and community involvement, that at the end of the day, Midtown can become a new district for Fort Collins that is identifiable and memorable and is part of the city as Old Town, as the campus, and in some ways that Midtown was before, and to take Midtown, revitalize it, and then make it something new and better in addition. That's the end of our formal presentation. We'd like to really encourage questions. We're being...
Yes, I was curious how the square fits into the design.
That's a good question. Just visually assessing it, I think it is a property that could very easily, be thought of as a redevelopment opportunity. We haven't been in direct contact, at least Josh may have. I don't think our team has been in direct contact with that landowner yet, so I don't really want to speak on their behalf. It is color-coded on our opportunity map as an opportunity site. And I think, I'd leave it at that, I think. But I think we've included it as an opportunity site, so that reflects our initial thinking.
Okay, yeah, I was wondering what kind of green or LEED aspects you are planning on incorporating into the redevelopment.
That is an excellent question. That is a very good question. At this level of planning and economic analysis that we're doing, it's hard to say that LEED, going through a LEED checklist or identifying that would come into play. It's certainly possible for projects within the development to individually be LEED certified. I have not actually thought through the implications of a LEED neighborhood designation. That in a multi-owner situation it probably could be difficult, but that's an interesting question too.
Well, just the short answer to the question is the Fort Collins Council's new opinion on when we incentivize projects is that they're going to be LEED certified, and that's part of the financial backing we provide now. So this absolutely, extent the city participates, will be green building and LEED certified.
And I would say that to the extent that a LEED neighborhood certification could be considered, this has everything going for it. It's got the BRT, it's existing sites, it's repurposing, existing buildings, it's infill, it's, just to back up and look at the big picture, this is a project in a situation where the city is investing in transportation infrastructure to support in-town redevelopment, presumably that would replace some extent of greenfield development somewhere 10 miles out on the edge of the prairie somewhere. I mean, this is precisely the sort of thing as a LEED professional as I am, I'm in the business of promoting. So I'm glad you asked. Dan? Yeah, okay.
Yes, I'd like to ask a quick question. I really appreciate your presentation. And one of the things that I find unique about downtown, its connection to the river gives it some kind of relevance or meaning over the years. And I was wondering if something at the mall, beside going shopping, is there something powerful that could be done to really create a destination so that as a family you would want to go there without having to go shopping per se? And that's maybe when I see your slide with the mountains or the connection to the quality of the open space. And I was wondering, one of the things I haven't had time maybe to see in your plan was integrating schools or things that give a reason for young families to move to Fort Collins.
Okay, several parts to your question there. At the broadest level, I would interpret your question of how do we develop an authentic identity and address and destination, out of Midtown. I mean, downtown is very unique, and that's authentic. It's real. It's been there for 150 years, and there's been a lot of investment in developing that. One answer is at the level of study that we've done, we're not sort of scratching deeply enough to truly address what are the unique and differentiating elements of the mall. It is certainly possible in a shopping district or shopping mall environment to create truly unique and local environments and open spaces and public space that make it seem like Fort Collins and not just another mall in another place. Have we decided what that is? No. I mean, I think the work is a long way from that. I'll be honest, we haven't frankly considered schools in Midtown or on the mall site. That's not a priority that was identified to us from the city. It's not saying that a school couldn't happen in Midtown, but our understanding that there wasn't a demand for that necessarily in this part of Fort Collins right now.
One of the opportunities that I think cities are seeing in terms of mall redevelopment, if you will, is the opportunity to introduce mixed uses, to introduce, in particular, civic uses, to try and replicate what is in downtown, which is more of a mixed use. district of both retail, office, residential, and civic and cultural facilities. So I think that's something that we'd like to explore with the city a little more. Certainly a lot of the civic and cultural facilities are in place in this community. They're in place and I think appropriately located in the downtown area. But I think we do need to think broadly about ways to, as you suggest, make this more than just a shopping center, to make it, to have some civic and community components that make it otherwise a destination.
You mentioned earlier that this is held, the focus is on the mall, and it's held by GGP, and they have an obligation to pursue their highest opportunities in redevelopment. Do you have any idea of their disposition in terms of where this ranks for that company in redevelopment?
I'll start answering that question, and some others might join in. I would actually, if we gave the impression that the mall is the emphasis of this study, I'd actually like to correct that. I see a combination, a really significant combination of the Midtown opportunity, the introduction of that residential, the introduction of the BRT, and Foothills Mall. Our view is really a both and. We don't see the two pieces of the district competing, and in fact we see them reinforcing one another. And a lot of the commercial strength of the corridor is really relied on the existence of the mall. So we really do see this as two elements that are just very strongly connected, and don't mean to focus just on the mall, if we gave that impression. Our approach to the mall planning that we've done has really mostly been independent. We have communicated with all the stakeholders, general growth included, but really our planning effort has been aimed at what any owner of that mall property with an interest in maintaining it as a regional retail destination. We've tried to address how any of those potential owners, including general growth, would approach it, because we believe that once you make the decision to pursue keeping the mall a regional retail destination, that they'll all face the same questions and hurdles, and it's driven by the market demand, the competing locations, interest in attracting another department store, and all those conditions will affect all of the potential owners or general growth continuing to own it continuously.
By way of introduction, I'm Dave Cuthill, and thankful for the opportunity to be here tonight. If you might have known, or I think it's no surprise to anyone that the shock to the economic system that is incurred over the last 24 months is I don't want to say it's been unprecedented, but we sure haven't seen it a cycle like this in our lifetimes. That hit general growth very hard. As you all well know, we filed for bankruptcy protection in April of 2008. And if you've been reading the papers, there now appears to be a lot of light at the end of the tunnel. I mean, I can't predict when we're going to be emerging from bankruptcy, but we are much more confident today than we would have been 30 days ago, and much more confident 30 days ago than we were 90 days ago. We have a very viable asset in Foothills Mall. Our capital deployment over the past 12 months has been relatively non-existent. We're going through a process right now of reevaluating and prioritizing our ability to spend capital as we move forward. As I alluded to some of the panel before we started this conversation, one of the interesting things is we've embarked on strategic planning for every one of our centers during the first quarter of 2010. So we've been putting together 5-year plans. I'm new to this market for general growth, but this is the second time I've been here in 3 weeks. So, I mean, I can't predict and say when it'll occur. It's definitely got our focus. So at this point, and again, thank you for the opportunity to be here tonight.
One of the things I would add to that is to really acknowledge and take our hats off as a consultant team and acknowledge the city. And they're stepping up to fund and pursue this study, which really has an urgency to it, and to sort of help the process along this far. And Mike Freeman's here and Josh is here, obviously. You know, I think it's been a really positive approach.
I have a question. Obviously, the development of the I-25-34 corridor with Centura Mall and outlet malls has drawn a lot of shoppers away from Fort Collins. And I don't know if there's an answer in this room to this, but the planning and what exactly motivates malls and retail stores to go out where people have to travel longer distances to get to that shopping destination than growing inward in Fort Collins, which makes sense from an energy standpoint, convenience, biking. So I'm just wondering.
Well, I think that's our point, is that Fort Collins retains an advantage on many counts over surrounding sites and opportunities. It isn't an established demographic. It's a very solid demographic. The university is a great stabilizing influence. And there is a mall here now with operating, you know, department stores, which is just a huge step up over a location that doesn't have any of those things. And access remains, you know, relatively good. No, it's not, you know, on the freeway, but it is an accessible location to the region. So, you know, we found ourselves to be boosters for, you know, for an in-town location for retail.
Your question is sort of describing what has happened over the past few years, and it is part of the development and evolution of any metropolitan market. As it grows and expands, you go from having one commercial center to, as the surrounding communities get to a certain critical size, they start developing their own commercial centers. So certainly what happened in Loveland is partially that area reached some critical mass to be able to support retail, and that community did what it could to encourage and support that development. As Jamie said, I think the opportunity is as the market does grow and expand, you have more competitive centers, but it means the central city, which in this case is Fort Collins, becomes the more specialized portion of the market. And as the metropolitan area, and this is becoming a metropolitan area, sort of grows, you know, we're kind of just beyond that 300,000 population threshold. You know, the area can support some goods and services that it couldn't previously support when it was 200,000. And ideally, those retail sites are in Fort Collins, in the central city, and that's why the emphasis, I think this city's emphasis, is on trying to accommodate it at refill or redevelopment sites, and trying not to allow what the market, sort of unconstrained what the market would want to do, which is push it out to I-25 and build it on greenfield sites.
You talked earlier about how this would be a real dramatic transformation. And I'm curious, in other projects like this that you've had in other similar sized cities, how has it gone? You know, have you been able to get cooperation from the landowners? Have the business owners been supportive of it? I mean, this is a real broad vision for a large piece of land. And I'm just wondering, you know, how long does it take? You know, do people cooperate? And who pays for it? Ends up paying for it.
Wow.
I know, it's a long question, I'm sorry.
That's 4 or 5 questions. And I won't try and answer them all alone here. Were you addressing them all, the corridor, or all of it? Do you feel? The entire corridor. You know, I think a situation like the mall will require a significant planned effort for redevelopment that includes public financing, and the ultimate long-term, you know, development of that takes a while. The process could start soon, but it would take several years before it's completed. That would be highly structured, highly planned. You don't get that kind of investment from department stores and from mall owners without seeing, how things will play out. In the corridor itself, I think we anticipate probably a much more market-driven development, where it's not about a highly structured situation where we're trying to get landowners to do something. We believe that over time the market and the landowners will come along, and that a goal of this study and the subsequent work that will come out of it will be to channel that market growth so that the ultimate public plan, open space, urban design is achieved through market forces, and yes, with possibly some some sort of public support that come through business or general improvement districts. There is infrastructure involved, and already the cities and the feds, the federal government, obviously are putting tremendous investment into the corridor through the BRT, the bus rapid transit. That's happening already.
One other comment, having spent a long part of my career looking at malls and redeveloping malls, it's a dilemma that mall owners face, whether it's company X, company Y, company Z. A mall faces a new competitor and says, we've got to change, we've got to reinvest. And the basic math is, if I make these changes, it's going to cost so much, it's going to cost X. And my income is going to go up by a certain amount. Does that increase in my income support the investment? If it doesn't support the investment, I need help from someone. Could I get help from a department store? Well, I've never had much success there. Could there possibly be help from the public sector if it serves the needs of the community and the objectives? Possibly it could. And I think that's part of the discussion that is yet to occur here. But it's a common thing. I've got to invest. I would go back to this capital-intensive nature of the mall business. In order to respond to competition, to evolve the property, to take advantage of the market, you need to invest. And does the income you generate from that investment support the investment? And that's a part of this study, which we haven't, that work hasn't been completed yet. Josh?
Well, I'll take a stab at answering two parts of your multi-part question. From the city's perspective, we have seen demonstrated successful outcomes of this kind of redevelopment elsewhere in the nation. That's part of what I think got us comfortable with undertaking this effort and spending taxpayer dollars at digging into this particular asset that we have in our community and trying to figure out how we make it a stronger asset and maintain it and support it. As an answer to your question of who pays for it, it's obviously, as we're starting to discover, it's going to be a partnership between the public sector and the private sector. Certain investments are best made by the public sector in the corridor. The study, when it is finally published and inked towards the end of April, well, I guess mid-May after our chance to interact with council at the end of April, will include a variety of things that are capital improvements. Some of those will be transportation. Some of those will have a different nature. Those could be candidates for public funding. They could be candidates to be paid for through a partnership. Part of the final stages of this study is the task that remains for the consultants is to help us conceive of ways of expanding our financing toolkit on the public sector side to bring additional dollars to bear to help move things forward. Jamie alluded to business improvement districts, general improvement districts. Those are types of funding mechanisms. We had an urban renewal authority, as I said at the beginning of the presentation, around the mall. We certainly will contemplate those kinds of tools as well, using tax increment financing. So we don't fully know the answer to the question of who's going to pay for it. We know that there is a lot of capital that will need to be put in place in order for redevelopment to occur. And I think we at the city, and I think the consultants also agree with this, that this is a long-term vision. We're talking about a vision that's going to take probably 20 or 30 years to really come to the transformative nature of what was shown tonight. Much of that can get started very shortly as property owners and landowners and tenants get interested as the economy turns around. So, the idea is to be able to do this incrementally and in stages so that ultimately we end up at a broad vision, but start to do it as soon as possible to help the corridor turn around. Thank you all for showing up, and we look forward to working with some of you as we try to develop this vision. Thank you.